Prologue. The word that undid him. I wasn't supposed to hear it. That's the thought I circle back to. Even now, months later, standing in the wreckage of what I thought was my life. I wasn't supposed to be home. I'd forgotten my laptop charger, something I never do. But that morning, I'd been distracted. Claire had been on the phone when I left for work, her voice bright and animated in a way it rarely was with me anymore, and I'd walked out into the October cold without thinking. By the time I realized, I was already halfway to the office. I turned the car around. The front door was unlocked. I stepped inside, keys still in hand, and heard laughter from the kitchen. Claire's friends, Emma and Jess, I think, though I've never been good with names, at her book club gatherings, were over for coffee. I could smell it, dark roast and something sweet, maybe the banana bread Claire makes when she wants to feel competent. I should have announced myself, should have called out, made noise, let them know I was there. I didn't. I stood in the hallway, one hand still on the doorknob, listening to the cadence of their voices. They were talking about marriages, comparing them the way people compare cars or houses, cataloging features and trade-offs. Emma's husband had just bought her an anniversary trip to Santorini. Jess was complaining about hers forgetting their school play. Then Claire's voice, easy and warm. I mean, don't get me wrong, Ethan's wonderful, reliable. He's never forgotten a birthday or an anniversary. He's steady. There was a pause. I remember that pause. It felt longer than it probably was. But, Emma prompted, laughing a little. Another pause, lighter this time. But I settled, Claire said. The words were casual, almost throwaway. She said them the way someone might say they settled for decaf or settled on the blue paint instead of the gray. Not cruel, not even unkind, just true. I mean, we all do, right? She continued, and I could hear the shrug in her voice. You can't have everything. I wanted passion once. I wanted the guy who made me feel like I was losing my mind. And I had that. Junior year of college. God, I was obsessed with him. But he was a disaster. Unreliable, selfish. I knew I couldn't build a life with him. And then you met Ethan, Jess said, her tone warm, approving. And then I met Ethan, Claire agreed. And he was different. Safe, kind, the kind of man you marry, you know, the kind you build a future with. And I love him, I do. He's a good husband, a good man, but not the guy who made you lose your mind, Emma finished. Claire laughed. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't sad. It was just matter of fact. No, she said. Not that guy. I don't remember walking back to the car. I don't remember the drive to the office or what I said to anyone that day. I must have functioned. I always function. But the hours are blank, a white static hum where my memory should be. What I do remember is the feeling. It wasn't anger. I wanted it to be anger. Anger would have been clean, directional, something I could aim and release. But it wasn't that. It was collapse. The sense that everything I thought was solid, my marriage, my life, my worth, had been built on a foundation that was never there. That I had been living in a house made of air, and only now, hearing that single word, did I realize I was falling. Settled. I turned it over and over in my mind, like a stone worn smooth by water. Settled. She settled. I was the man she settled for. not chosen, selected, not desired, accepted. I thought about our wedding day, the way she'd smiled at me when I'd turned to see her walking down the aisle, how my chest had tightened with the certainty that I was the luckiest man alive. I thought about the first time I told her I loved her, sitting on her couch after dinner, her hand in mine, her eyes soft and warm. I thought about the nights we'd stayed up talking, the vacations we'd planned, the life we'd built together, piece by careful piece. And I thought, she was always choosing something else. Not me. Not really. She was choosing stability, security, the reasonable option, the safe bet. I was the man you marry when you've learned your lesson, when you've been burned by passion and decided that steady hands are worth more than a racing heart. I was the fallback plan. That night, I sat across from her at dinner and watched her talk about her day. She'd had a good meeting at work. Emma had recommended a new novel. The neighbor's dog had gotten loose again. Her voice was light, unburdened. She had no idea what I had heard. No idea that the man sitting across from her had spent the last 8 hours replaying a single sentence until it had carved a hollow space in his chest. I wanted to ask her. I wanted to say, "Did you mean it? Am I really the person you settled for?" But I already knew the answer. And more than that, I knew she wouldn't understand why it mattered. She loved me. I believed that. She was happy. Our life together was good, stable, exactly what she'd wanted, what she'd settled for. I looked at her across the table, this woman I'd loved for 12 years, and felt the distance between us open like a canyon. She reached for the salad bowl, her hand steady and sure, and I realized with a quiet, devastating clarity, she doesn't see me. She never has. She sees the life I provide, the comfort, the reliability. She sees the man who doesn't disappoint, who doesn't demand too much, who fits neatly into the life she wanted to build. But she doesn't see me. And the worst part, the part that made my throat tighten and my hands go cold, was that I had let her. I had spent 12 years being the man she needed, the man she could rely on, the man who made her life easier and safer and more predictable. I had never once asked if she wanted me. That night, lying in bed beside her, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing, I stared at the ceiling and felt the shape of my life shift beneath me. Nothing had changed. Everything had changed. I had been chosen for the wrong reasons, and I didn't know if I could keep living with that. The days after blurred together in a way that frightened me. I went to work, I came home, I kissed Claire on the cheek when I walked in the door, the same way I always had. We made dinner together on Wednesday, her chopping vegetables while I stirred the pasta sauce, our movements synchronized after years of practice. On Friday, we watched a movie, her head resting against my shoulder, my arm around her waist. It all looked the same, but I was different. I started remembering things I'd never questioned before. The way she introduced me at parties. "This is my husband, Ethan." Never, "This is Ethan." As if husband was the defining characteristic, the only one that mattered. The way she talked about our future. College funds and retirement accounts and the vacation home we'd buy someday. Always practical, always sensible, never once tinged with longing or wild hope. the way she touched me. It was affectionate, comfortable, the touch of someone who liked you, who cared about you, who was used to you being there. But it wasn't hungry. It wasn't urgent. It was the touch of someone who had already decided what you were worth. I started remembering other moments, ones I'd filed away without examining. The time, early in our relationship, when she'd told me I was different from the guys she usually dated. I'd taken it as a compliment then. Now I heard it differently. You are not the kind of man I want. You're the kind of man I should want. The time her mother had pulled me aside at our engagement party and said, with tears in her eyes, "Thank you for being exactly what she needs." Not what she wants, what she needs. The time Claire herself had said, laughing over brunch with friends, "I finally grew up and chose the right kind of man." As if I was a corrective measure, a course correction after years of mistakes. I had heard these things and felt proud, chosen, validated. Now they felt like a catalog of evidence. I thought about the men who came before me. I knew their names, vaguely. There was one in college, another in her mid-20s. She'd been vague about them, dismissive even, always framing them as lessons learned. But I remembered the way her voice had changed when she mentioned the college boyfriend once, years ago. The slight catch in her throat. The way she'd looked away, out the window. Her expression distant and complicated. She had loved him in a way she didn't love me. Or maybe not love. Maybe it was something else. Something rawer, more dangerous, more consuming. The kind of feeling that leaves marks. And I had been the man who came after. The one who didn't leave marks. The one who soothed and steadied and made her feel safe enough to breathe again. I wasn't the love story. I was the epilogue. At night, I started staying up later than Claire, sitting in the living room with the lights off, staring at nothing. I told her I had work to finish, emails to answer. She believed me, because why wouldn't she? I had never lied to her before. But the truth was, I couldn't be in that bed, lying beside her knowing what I knew. Couldn't feel her warmth beside me and not think, this is comfort, not desire. I started wondering what it would feel like to be wanted, not needed, not relied upon, not chosen because I was the reasonable option. Wanted. To be looked at the way I had looked at Claire on our wedding day, like she was the only possible answer to a question I hadn't known I was asking. To be the person someone couldn't stop thinking about, couldn't imagine their life without, couldn't bear to lose. I had never been that person. Not to Claire. Maybe not to anyone. And the realization opened something inside me, a kind of hunger I hadn't known I was carrying. I thought I'd been content, thought I'd built a good life, a happy life, but now I saw it for what it was. A life where I had made myself easy to love by never asking for too much, by being steady and reliable and safe, by never demanding to be anyone's first choice. I thought about my father, the way he'd always told me, be the kind of man people can count on. And I had been. I had built my entire identity around that. I was the friend who showed up, the employee who delivered, the husband who never forgot an anniversary, never raised his voice, never made waves. I had thought that was enough. I had thought being good was the same as being loved. But now I understood. I had been good so that I would be loved. I had traded my own desires, my own needs, my own right to be wanted for the safety of being needed. And Claire had accepted that trade. She hadn't asked me to make it, hadn't demanded it, but she had let me,
and she had built her life on the certainty that I would keep making it, over and over without ever asking for anything in return. Settled. The word had lodged itself inside me, a splinter I couldn't remove. I carried it everywhere. At the grocery store, reaching for the brand of coffee Claire liked instead of the one I preferred. At the gym, running on the treadmill beside men who looked more confident, more desired, more alive. At work, sitting through meetings where I gave the right answers and made the smart suggestions and was valued for being exactly what everyone expected me to be. I was 41 years old, and I had built a life where I was never the risk anyone took. I was the safe choice, and I didn't know if I could keep being that. Not anymore. That night, 3 weeks after I'd heard her say it, I stood in the bathroom, brushing my teeth, and looked at myself in the mirror. Really looked. The lines around my eyes, the gray starting to thread through my hair at the temples. The face of a man who had been responsible his entire life. A man who had never been reckless enough to be unforgettable. I thought, what would it feel like to be chosen because someone couldn't help themselves? And I didn't have an answer. But I knew, standing there in the fluorescent light, that I couldn't keep living without one.
Chapter 1. After the hearing. The first thing I noticed was how well we functioned. Claire and I moved through our days with the precision of a machine that had been running smoothly for over a decade. She woke at 6:30, I woke at 6:45. She showered first, while I made coffee. By 7:15, we were both in the kitchen, her with yogurt and granola, me with toast and eggs. We talked about the day ahead, meetings, errands, dinner plans. We were excellent at this. And that, I realized, was the problem. It was a Thursday morning, nearly a month after I'd heard her say the word, and I was watching her spread cream cheese on a bagel with the same careful efficiency she brought to everything. Her hair was still damp from the shower, pulled back in a clip. She was wearing the gray blazer I'd bought her for her birthday 2 years ago. She looked beautiful. She always looked beautiful, and I felt nothing. No, that wasn't true. I felt something. But it was the wrong thing. It was the feeling you get when you look at a photograph of yourself from years ago. Recognition without connection. Like looking at evidence of a life you used to live. "You're quiet this morning," Claire said, glancing up at me. "Just tired," I said. It was the answer I'd been giving for weeks now. Tired, distracted, long day. She accepted it every time, because what else would she do? I had never been the kind of husband who required interrogation. I had never given her a reason to worry. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You've been working too hard. Maybe we should plan a weekend away, something low-key. That bed and breakfast in the Berkshires?" "Maybe," I said. She smiled, satisfied, and went back to her bagel. I looked at her hand on mine. It was warm, familiar. I could trace every line of her palm from memory, could predict exactly how her fingers would curve around mine. There was comfort in that, safety, but no electricity, no spark, no sense that this touch meant anything beyond routine affection. I thought about the way she'd described her college boyfriend, the one who'd made her feel like she was losing her mind. I wondered what his touch had felt like, if it had made her skin hum, if she'd counted the hours between seeing him, if she'd felt in his presence like the air was different. I wondered if she had ever felt that way with me. I knew the answer. "Ethan?" I blinked. Claire was watching me, her expression mildly concerned. "Sorry, what?" "I asked if you could pick up the dry cleaning on your way home. I have that client dinner tomorrow and I need the blue dress." "Sure," I said. "No problem." She smiled again, relieved, and I watched as the concern slipped from her face. It had been easy to reassure her.
It was always easy. I was reliable, steady. The man who picked up dry cleaning without being reminded twice. The man she'd settled for. Work was worse. I sat through a meeting about quarterly projections and heard myself contributing in all the right ways, nodding at the right moments, offering suggestions that were well received but not revolutionary. I was good at my job. Senior project manager, well compensated, respected by my team. I had built a career on being dependable. But sitting there, watching my boss gesture at a PowerPoint slide about growth targets, I felt the same hollowness I'd felt that morning with Claire. When did I become this? I thought about college, the version of myself who'd wanted to write. I'd been an English major, back when that felt like a brave choice instead of a naive one. I'd spent hours in coffee shops, filling notebooks with half-formed stories and fragments of poems that never went anywhere. I'd imagined a life that looked nothing like this one, something messier, more uncertain, more alive. Then I'd graduated, and reality had set in. The need for health insurance, student loans, rent. I'd taken a job in project management because it paid well and because I was good at organizing things, at making other people's visions come to life. I told myself it was temporary. 20 years later, I was still here. Ethan, thoughts? I looked up. My boss, David, mid-50s, kind, in a distant way, was looking at me, expectantly. The rest of the team was watching. "Sorry," I said. "Could you repeat the question?" There was a flicker of surprise on David's face. I never asked people to repeat themselves. I was always paying attention. "I was asking if you think the timeline for the Meridian project is realistic?" I glanced at the slide. The timeline was aggressive, but achievable if everything went according to plan. Which it wouldn't, because nothing ever did, but we'd commit to it anyway, and I'd be the one making sure we delivered, pulling late nights and managing expectations and keeping everyone calm. It's tight, but we can make it work. David nodded, satisfied. The meeting moved on. I sat back in my chair and felt the weight of it. The endless repetition of being the person who made things work, who absorbed the stress so others didn't have to, who was valued for his ability to keep the machinery running smoothly. I'm doing it here too, being the safe choice, the reliable one. And the worst part was, I had no idea how to be anything else. That evening, I picked up the dry cleaning like I'd promised. Claire's blue dress was wrapped in plastic, elegant and impersonal. I hung it in the back seat of my car and sat there for a moment, engine running, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed. A text from Claire. "Running late at office. Can you start dinner? Chicken in fridge." I texted back, "Sure." Another thing I was good at. Being flexible, accommodating, easy. I drove home through the October dusk, the streets lined with trees losing their leaves. There was something about this time of year that had always felt melancholy to me, the slow dying of things, the inevitability of winter, but also beautiful, painfully beautiful. I parked in the driveway and sat there, looking at our house. It was a good house, a sensible house. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a yard that needed mowing. We'd bought it 5 years ago, both of us proud of the mortgage we could afford, the future we were building. I tried to remember the last time I'd felt proud of something. Really proud. Not satisfied, not content. Proud. I couldn't. Inside, I started dinner. Chicken breast, roasted vegetables, quinoa, Claire's preferred weeknight meal, healthy and uncomplicated. I moved through the kitchen with the muscle memory of repetition, and I thought about the thousands of meals I'd cooked in this space, the hundreds of times I'd stood at this counter, chopping vegetables, heating olive oil, setting the timer. It was a good life. Why didn't it feel like mine? Claire came home at 7:30, looking tired but put together. She kissed my cheek, dropped her bag on the counter, and poured herself a glass of wine. "God, today was endless," she said. "Patterson kept changing his mind about the campaign strategy. I swear, by the end of it, I wanted to throw my laptop out the window." "Sounds frustrating," I said, plating the chicken. "It was, but I got him to commit to the digital-first approach, so that's something." She took a sip of wine, watching me. "How was your day?" "Fine," I said. "Normal." "Good." We sat down at the table. She asked about the meeting. I gave her the summary, brief, factual, nothing she'd remember tomorrow. She told me about Patterson, about the client dinner she was dreading, about Emma's new haircut. I nodded in the right places, laughed when I was supposed to. We were so good at this, and I hated it. "Are you okay?" Claire asked suddenly. I looked up. She was watching me with that same mild concern from this morning, the kind that would disappear the moment I reassured her. "Yeah," I said, "just tired." "You keep saying that." "I know, work's been busy." She studied me for another moment, then nodded. "Well, the weekend's almost here. We can relax." "Right." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand again, the same gesture from this morning, the same comfortable touch, and I felt it again, that horrible absence where something else should be. I squeezed back, because that's what I did. I was the husband who squeezed back. That night, Claire fell asleep before me, the way she always did. She was a good sleeper, head on the pillow, out in minutes. I envied that. I lay beside her in the dark, listening to her breathe, and I thought about the years we'd spent in this bed. 12 years of marriage, 3 years of dating before that, 15 years total. I tried to remember a moment when she'd looked at me with urgency, with need, with the kind of desire that made sense of all the love songs and poems and stupid romantic comedies. I couldn't find one. There had been affection, warmth, satisfaction. We'd had good sex, especially in the beginning, frequent and enthusiastic, the way young couples do. But even then, I realized now, there had been something missing, some quality of desperation, of hunger. She had wanted the life I represented, the stability, the future. She had never wanted me in a way that defied logic or reason, and I had convinced myself that was enough, that adult love was supposed to be calm and steady and rational, that passion was for teenagers and fools. But lying there in the dark, I felt the ache of it, the knowledge that I had never been anyone's wild, irrational choice, that I had spent my entire life being selected from my usefulness, my steadiness, my inability to disrupt. I thought about the men I knew who'd been chosen differently. My college roommate, Jake, whose girlfriend had once driven 6 hours in a snowstorm just to see him for a weekend. My colleague, Michael, whose wife still texted him in the middle of the day, silly messages that made him smile in meetings. My own father, who I'd once heard tell my mother, late at night when they thought I was asleep, "I'd choose you again, every time." I had wanted that. I still wanted that. And I didn't know if it was too late. Claire shifted beside me, her hand moving to rest on my chest, an unconscious gesture, one she'd made 1,000 times. I looked at her in the darkness, at the shape of her face against the pillow, and I felt the vast distance between us. She was sleeping peacefully, unaware that anything had changed, but I was awake, And I couldn't stop wondering what it would feel like to be loved by someone who couldn't help themselves. Chapter 2. What Safety Costs. I decided to talk to her on a Saturday morning, not about what I'd heard. I still couldn't bring myself to say the word settled out loud, as if speaking it would make it more real than it already was. But I thought maybe I could ask the questions that circled endlessly in my mind. Maybe I could find a way to say, "Do you want me? Have you ever wanted me?" Maybe she'd have an answer that would make this bearable. We were in the kitchen. Claire was making pancakes, humming something under her breath, a habit she had when she was content. Sunlight was streaming through the window, catching in her hair. It was the kind of domestic scene that should have felt warm, safe. Instead, it felt like a photograph, beautiful and distant and unchangeable. "Claire," I said. "Hmm?" She didn't look up from the griddle. I hesitated. "How did you ask someone if they'd ever truly wanted you? How did you phrase a question that exposed everything you'd been afraid to know?" "Do you ever think about how we got together?" I asked. It wasn't the right question, but it was close enough. A door I could push open if she gave me the right response. She glanced at me, smiling. "Sometimes. Why?" "Just wondering. What made you say yes when I asked you out that first time?" She laughed, flipping a pancake. "God, I don't know. That was 15 years ago. But you must remember something." She was quiet for a moment, considering. I watched her face, looking for something, a softness, a longing, any sign that she'd been drawn to me in a way that mattered. "You were different," she said finally, "from the other guys I dated. You were thoughtful. You actually listened when I talked. You didn't play games." "You were safe," I heard. "You were easy." "That's it?" I asked. She looked at me, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, was there something about me specifically, something that made you think, I need to know this person?" The confusion deepened. "Ethan, what's this about?" I wanted to push, wanted to say, "Tell me you felt something more than relief when you met me. Tell me I wasn't just the logical next step after bad decisions." But I couldn't, because I was already afraid of the answer. "Nothing," I said. "Just curious." She studied me for another moment, then shrugged. "Well, I liked that you were stable, mature. You had your life together. After the chaos of my 20s, that mattered to me." After the chaos. After the men who'd made her feel alive. After she'd decided feeling alive wasn't worth it. "Right," I said. She plated the pancakes and brought them to the table, kissing the top of my head as she passed. "Why are you being weird this morning?" "I'm not. You are." She sat down across from me, pouring syrup. "You've been weird for weeks, actually. Is something going on at work?" "No." "Then what?" I looked at her, at this woman I'd spent 15 years with, and I realized I had no idea how to explain what was happening inside me. How could I tell her that everything felt wrong when nothing had actually changed, that I was suffocating under the weight of being exactly what she needed? "I'm fine," I said. "Just tired." She sighed. "You keep saying that. Because it's true." "Ethan." She put down her fork, her expression shifting into something more serious. "If something's bothering you, you need to tell me. I can't read your mind." "But you should want to," I thought.
You should want to know every thought in my head. You should be curious about the parts of me I don't show you." "It's nothing," I said. "Really." She watched me for another moment, then picked up her fork again. "Okay, but if you want to talk, I'm here." It was a kind offer, sincere even, but it was also a formality, a box checked. She had offered, I'd declined, and now we could both go back to the comfortable routine of not digging too deep. I ate my pancakes. They were good. They were always good, and I felt the distance between us grow another inch. That afternoon, I went to the gym. It was something I did 3 times a week, another part of the routine, the maintenance of a body that was still mostly functional at 41. I ran on the treadmill for 40 minutes, watching CNN on the mounted television, and I thought about Claire's answer. You were stable, mature, you had your life together. Qualities you'd list on a resume, attributes that made me a good investment, not reasons to fall in love. I pushed myself harder, increasing the speed until my lungs burned and sweat dripped into my eyes. There was something satisfying about physical exhaustion, the way it quieted the mind, turned everything into the simple mechanics of breath and movement. But even that couldn't stop the thoughts. I thought about the men Claire had dated before me. She had mentioned them occasionally, always dismissively, but I'd pieced together a rough outline over the years. There was Ryan, the college boyfriend, the one who'd made her lose her mind. He'd been in a band, I think, or wanted to be, something artistic and impractical. They'd broken up badly, the kind of breakup that left scars. Then there was someone in her mid-20s. I didn't know much about him, only that it had been intense and unsustainable. Another disaster, another lesson learned. And then me, the corrective. The man who showed up on time and paid for dinner and asked about her day and never made her wonder where she stood. I slowed the treadmill to a walk, breathing hard. In the mirror that lined the gym wall, I caught sight of myself, flushed, sweating, ordinary. A middle-aged man in decent shape, nothing remarkable, the kind of man you'd pass on the street without a second glance, the kind of man you settled for.
That night, I tried again. We were on the couch, Claire reading a novel while I pretended to watch a documentary about climate change. The house was quiet, except for the low murmur of the television. It should have been peaceful. "Can I ask you something?" I said. She looked up from her book. "Sure. Do you ever think about the beginning, when we first started dating?" She smiled. "We literally talked about this morning." "I know, but I mean, do you remember what it felt like?" What felt like?" "Being with me, for the first time." She closed her book, setting it aside. "Ethan, what is going on with you? I'm just asking." "You're not just asking. You've been acting strange for weeks, and now you're asking me weird questions about our relationship. If something's wrong, you need to tell me." I wanted to. God, I wanted to. I wanted to say, "I heard you. I heard you tell your friends you settled." And it broke something in me that I don't know how to fix. But the words wouldn't come, because saying them would make it real, would force a conversation I wasn't ready to have, would open a door I wasn't sure either of us could walk through. "Nothing's wrong," I said. "Then why are you asking me this?" "I don't know. Nostalgia?" She studied me, her expression caught between concern and frustration. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Fine. You want to know what it felt like. It felt nice, comfortable, like I'd finally found someone I could build a life with, someone who wasn't going to blow up my world." "Right," I said. "Is that what you wanted to hear?" "I don't know what I wanted to hear."
She picked up her book again, her patience clearly wearing thin. "Well, when you figure it out, let me know." I turned back to the television, not seeing it, not hearing it, just sitting there beside my wife, feeling more alone than I had in years.
The week that followed was worse. We moved through our routines with increasing awkwardness, like dancers who'd forgotten the steps. Claire grew quieter, more watchful. I could feel her trying to figure me out, trying to identify the problem so she could solve it. But there was no solution. Not one she could give me anyway. On Wednesday, she stayed late at work. On Thursday, she had dinner with Emma. On Friday, she went to bed early, claiming a headache. We were giving each other space, I realized, the way you do when something is fractured but you're not sure how badly. On Saturday, I woke to find her already up, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop and a cup of coffee. She looked tired. "Morning," I said. "Morning." I poured myself coffee and sat down across from her. The silence stretched between us, heavy and unfamiliar. We'd never been people who needed to fill silence, but this felt different, like the quiet was its own kind of statement. "I think we should talk," Claire said finally. My stomach tightened. "Okay." She closed her laptop, folding her hands on the table. "Something's been off between us. I don't know what it is, but I can feel it, and I need you to tell me what's going on." I looked at her, at the woman I'd built a life with, the woman who'd chosen me for all the wrong reasons, and I tried to find the words. "Do you love me?" I asked. She blinked, surprised. "Of course I love you. Why would you even ask that?" "Not because you should, not because I'm a good husband or because we have a good life. Do you love me, the person I am?" "Ethan, what?" "Just answer the question." She stared at me, and I saw something flicker across her face. Confusion, maybe, or fear. "I don't understand what you're asking." "I'm asking if you've ever wanted me in a way that didn't make sense, in a way that wasn't rational or logical or safe, if you've ever looked at me and felt something you couldn't control." The silence that followed was its own answer. She trailed off, searching for words. "I don't think love is supposed to be out of control. That's not real, Ethan. That's just chemistry or infatuation. What we have is real." "What we have is safe," I said. "Yes, and that's a good thing. That's what makes relationships last." "But is it what makes them matter?" She looked at me like I was speaking a language she didn't understand. And maybe I was. Maybe we'd been speaking different languages this entire time, and I'd been too comfortable to notice. "I don't know what you want me to say," she said quietly. "I want you to say you've wanted me, that I've been more than just the logical choice, that somewhere, at some point, I made you feel something you couldn't explain." Her eyes filled with tears, and I felt it terrible guilt because I was hurting her, and that was the last thing I wanted, but I couldn't stop. "I love you," she said. "I married you. I chose to build a life with you. Isn't that enough?" And there it was. The question that had been living in my chest since I'd heard her say that word. "I don't know," I said. "I thought it was, but I don't think it is anymore." She wiped at her eyes, her hands shaking. "I don't understand what's happening." "Neither do I." And that, at least, was true. That night, I slept in the guest room. Not because we'd fought. We hadn't. After that conversation, we'd both retreated into silence, moving through the house like ghosts. Claire had gone for a walk. I'd sat in the living room, staring at nothing. When she came back, she'd gone straight to the bedroom, and I couldn't follow her. I lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, and I thought about all the years I'd spent convincing myself that being needed was the same as being wanted. All the years I'd spent being good, being reliable, being safe. I thought I was building something solid, something that would last. But now I saw it for what it was. A life where I'd made myself easy to love by never demanding to be loved the right way. And I didn't know if I could keep living like that. I didn't know if I wanted to. Chapter 3. Meeting Mara. I met her at a coffee shop on a Tuesday afternoon. I wasn't supposed to be there. I was supposed to be at the office, sitting through another meeting about deliverables and timelines. But I'd walked out halfway through, mumbling something about a doctor's appointment, and no one had questioned it. Because I never did things like that. I was Ethan Hale, the reliable one, and if I said I had a doctor's appointment, then I must have had one. I drove aimlessly for 20 minutes before pulling into the parking lot of a coffee shop I'd never been to. One of those deliberately rustic places with Edison bulbs and reclaimed wood and baristas who looked like they played in indie bands. Not my usual kind of place, but that was the point. I didn't want to be my usual self. Inside, I ordered a coffee. Black, nothing fancy, and found a table by the window. I'd brought my laptop, thinking I might work, but instead I just sat there, watching people pass on the street. Students with backpacks, mothers with strollers, an old man walking a terrier. Lives in motion. And me, sitting still, trying to figure out how mine had become something I no longer recognized. "Is this seat taken?" I looked up. She was standing beside the table, holding a cup of tea in both hands, her expression more statement than question. Mid to late 30s, maybe 40. Dark hair pulled back in a loose knot, gray sweater, jeans, boots. No jewelry except for a watch. She had the kind of face that was hard to look away from. Not conventionally beautiful, but striking, intelligent, awake. "No," I said. "Go ahead." She sat down across from me, settling in like we'd planned to meet here. For a moment, she didn't say anything, just wrapped her hands around her tea and looked out the window. I went back to my laptop, pretending to work, acutely aware of her presence. "You look like someone who's always been good for other people." I glanced up. She was watching me now, her expression curious but not intrusive. "Excuse me?" "Sorry, that was rude." She didn't look sorry. "I have a bad habit of saying what I'm thinking. You just have that look." "What look?" "Like you've spent your whole life being what everyone needed." She tilted her head slightly. "Am I wrong?" I should have been offended, should have made some polite excuse and moved to a different table. But there was something about the directness of it, the way she'd seen something in me that I'd barely admitted to myself, that made me stay. "No," I said. "You're not wrong." She nodded, as if that confirmed something. "I'm Mara. Ethan." "Nice to meet you, Ethan." She took a sip of her tea. "So, what brings you to a coffee shop on a Tuesday afternoon? Playing hooky?" "Something like that." "Rough day?" "Rough few weeks." She didn't press, and I was grateful for it. She just sat there, drinking her tea, letting the silence exist without trying to fill it. It was strange, sitting across from a complete stranger who'd somehow managed to articulate something I hadn't been able to. "What about you?" I asked. "What brings you here?"
I work from home, freelance graphic designer. Sometimes I need to get out of my apartment before I start talking to the walls. Is that a real risk? She smiled. You'd be surprised how chatty walls can get when you're on deadline. I found myself smiling back. It felt unfamiliar, the shape of it on my face. So, she said, leaning back in her chair, what does someone who's always good for other people do when they play hooky? Apparently sit in a coffee shop and get psychoanalyzed by strangers. Could be worse. You could be sitting in a bar at 2 in the afternoon. Give me another few weeks. She laughed. A real laugh, unguarded and warm. That bad, huh? I don't know. Maybe. I'm still figuring it out. She studied me for a moment, her expression shifting into something more serious. Can I tell you something? Sure. People who are good for other people usually forget to be good for themselves, and eventually, that catches up with you. The words landed somewhere deep, in a place I'd been trying to ignore. Speaking from experience? I asked. Unfortunately. She wrapped her hands around her tea again, her gaze distant. I spent 10 years in a marriage where I was very good at being what my husband needed, supportive, flexible, understanding. And then one day I woke up and realized I had no idea who I was anymore. Just this outline of a person filled in with someone else's expectations. What did you do? I left. The simplicity of it was startling. Just like that? Not just like that. It took a year of therapy and a lot of very uncomfortable conversations. But eventually, yes, I left. Do you regret it? She thought about that. No, but I regret how long it took me to realize I needed to. I regret all the years I spent trying to be enough for someone who didn't actually want what I had to offer. I felt something twist in my chest. Recognition, maybe. Or envy. That sounds... I trailed off, not sure how to finish. Familiar? She offered. Yeah. She nodded slowly. You're married. It wasn't a question. How did you know? You have that look too. Like you're trying to figure out if staying is the same as choosing. I stared at her. This woman I'd met 10 minutes ago, who somehow saw through me with the kind of clarity that terrified and relieved me in equal measure. I should probably go, I said. Probably, she agreed, but she didn't move and neither did I. We sat there in silence, the coffee shop humming around us, and I felt something shift, some small opening in the careful architecture of my life. Can I ask you something? I said. Sure. When you left, your marriage, did you know what you were going to, or did you just know you couldn't stay? She was quiet for a moment, considering. Both, I think. I knew I couldn't keep being that version of myself, but I also knew I wanted something different, something that felt real. Not comfortable, not safe, just real. And did you find it? She smiled, but there was something sad in it. Still looking.
I didn't mean to go back. But on Thursday, I found myself at the same coffee shop, same time, same table by the window. I told myself it was coincidence, that I just needed to get out of the office again, clear my head, and this place happened to be convenient. I didn't believe it. Neither, apparently, did Mara. She walked in 20 minutes after I did, saw me sitting there, and raised an eyebrow. Playing hooky again? Seems like a pattern. She ordered her tea and sat down across from me, settling in like we'd been doing this for years instead of days. So, she said, how are the walls at your office? Still standing, barely. That good, huh? I smiled despite myself. There was something about her that made it easier to breathe, a kind of honesty that required no performance. I had a fight with my wife. Not a fight, really, but close enough. Want to talk about it? I don't know. Maybe. She waited, not pushing, just present. It was such a small thing, that patience, that willingness to let me find my own words. But it felt enormous. She doesn't understand why I'm unhappy, I said finally, and I don't know how to explain it to her, because on paper, everything's fine. Good marriage, good job, good life. There's no villain, no crisis, just this feeling that I'm living someone else's life. Mara nodded slowly. The problem with fine is that it's not the same as right. Exactly. I leaned back, exhaling. But how do you tell someone that? How do you say, I know everything looks good, but I feel like I'm disappearing? You just did. To a stranger in a coffee shop. Sometimes strangers are easier. We don't have expectations yet. Yet. The word hung in the air between us. What does she want from you? Your wife. I thought about Claire, about the way she'd looked at me last Saturday when I couldn't answer her questions. She wants me to be okay. She wants the life we built to be enough. And is it? I don't know. It should be. That's what makes it so hard. I have everything I'm supposed to want, but I feel like I'm suffocating. Mara was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. When she spoke, her voice was soft but certain. Can I tell you what I think? Please. I think you've spent so long being what other people needed that you forgot to ask what you needed. And now you're waking up to that, and it's terrifying. Because if you're not the reliable one, the stable one, the one who makes everyone else's life easier, then who are you? The accuracy of it stole my breath. So what do I do? I asked. I don't know. That's the hard part. No one can answer that for you. That's not very helpful. She smiled. No, but it's true. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not attraction, exactly, though that was there too. It was more like recognition. The sense that here was someone who understood what it meant to lose yourself in the slow, quiet ways that no one notices until it's too late. Why did you come back today? Honestly? Please. Because you looked like someone who needed to be seen. She met my eyes, and I know what that feels like. Friday, I didn't go to the coffee shop. I stayed at work, pushing through meetings and emails, trying to convince myself that Thursday had been an aberration, a moment of weakness. I was married. I was 41 years old. I didn't meet strange women in coffee shops and tell them things I couldn't tell my wife. Except I had. And worse, I wanted to do it again. That night, Claire and I had dinner in near silence. She'd made salmon, my favorite, and I knew it was an offering. Her way of trying to fix whatever was broken between us. How was work? She asked. Fine. Busy? Yeah. She set down her fork. Ethan. What? You're doing it again. The one-word answers, the distance. I'm trying here. I know. Then help me. Tell me what you need. I looked at her across the table, at this woman who'd been my partner for 15 years, and I felt the impossibility of it. How could I tell her what I needed when I was only just beginning to understand it myself? I need time, I said, to figure things out. Figure what out? I don't know. That's the problem.
She looked at me for a long moment, her expression caught between hurt and frustration. Then she stood, picking up her plate. "Take all the time you need," she said quietly. "But at some point, Ethan, you're going to have to decide if you want to be here. Because I can't keep doing this limbo where you're physically present but emotionally gone." She walked into the kitchen, leaving me alone at the table. She was right, and I had no idea what to do about it. Saturday, I went back to the coffee shop. Mara was already there, sitting at our table by the window. She looked up when I walked in, and something passed across her face. Relief, maybe, or resignation. "Hey," I said. "Hey." I got my coffee and sat down across from her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "I almost didn't come," I said finally. "But you did." "Yeah. Why?" I thought about Claire's words last night, about the decision I was going to have to make, about the fact that sitting here felt more real than anything in my actual life. "Because when I'm with you, I don't feel like I'm disappearing," I said. She looked at me, her expression serious. "That's dangerous." "I know. I'm not trying to save you, Ethan. I can't. That's not how this works." "I'm not asking you to." "Then what are you asking?" I didn't have an answer. Or maybe I did, and I was afraid to say it. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe just to keep coming back, to keep talking, to keep feeling like myself." She was quiet for a long time, her eyes searching mine. Then she nodded, slow and deliberate. "Okay," she said, "but I need you to understand something." "What?" "I don't want what's left over. I don't want the pieces of you that your wife doesn't need. If you're here, really here, then you need to choose it. Not because you're running from something, but because you're running toward something." The words settled in my chest, heavy and true. "I don't know if I can do that," I said. "Then maybe you shouldn't be here." She said it gently, but with finality. And I understood, sitting there in that coffee shop with this woman who barely knew me but somehow saw me, that she was right. I couldn't keep living in the in-between. I couldn't keep disappearing into someone else's life while pretending it was my own. I had to choose. The question was, what did I actually want? And was I brave enough to reach for it?
Chapter 4. Being seen is dangerous. I started lying. Small lies at first, necessary ones, I told myself. I have a meeting with a client. I need to work late. I'm going to the gym. All perfectly reasonable excuses for a man who'd spent his entire life being reasonable. Claire didn't question them. Why would she? I'd never given her a reason to doubt me. But every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, I drove to that coffee shop and sat across from Mara, and we talked. Just talked. That's what I told myself, anyway. That it was innocent, harmless. Two people sharing coffee and conversation. Nothing was happening. Nothing physical, nothing romantic. We were just talking. But I knew the truth. Something was happening. Something that felt more intimate than anything I'd experienced in years. "Tell me about your childhood," Mara said one Thursday, 3 weeks after we'd first met.
We were at our usual table. Rain was streaking the windows, turning the afternoon gray and close. The coffee shop was quieter than usual, just us and a handful of students with laptops. "Why?" I asked. "Because I want to know." She said it simply, as if it were obvious, as if wanting to know someone was reason enough. I thought about the suburbs where I'd grown up, the quiet house, the parents who'd loved me in their careful, measured way. It was fine, normal. My dad worked in insurance. My mom was a teacher. We had dinner together every night. They never fought, or if they did, I never heard it. Sounds stable. It was. And lonely? I looked at her, startled. Why would you say that?
Because stability can be lonely when it's the only thing you have. She was right, I realized. My childhood had been stable, but it had also been quiet, predictable. A life where nothing unexpected ever happened, where emotions were kept at reasonable volumes, where the measure of success was the absence of problems. I'd learned early that being good meant being easy, that love was something you earned by not being difficult. "Yeah," I said. "It was lonely." Mara nodded, as if she'd already known. "And then you grew up and became exactly like them." "Is that a bad thing?" "I don't know. Is it?" I thought about my father, the way he'd spent 40 years at the same insurance company, coming home every night at 6:15, eating dinner, watching television, going to bed. A good life, a safe life, a life that had taught me that being present was the same as being alive. "I used to think it wasn't," I said. "I used to think that was the goal, to be stable and reliable and good, to build something solid. And now? Now I think maybe I confused being stable with being invisible." Mara was quiet for a moment, her fingers wrapped around her mug. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "You're not invisible, Ethan." The way she said my name, like it meant something, like I was someone worth naming, made my chest tighten. "Claire thinks I am," I said. "Claire sees what she needs to see. That's different from seeing you." "And you see me?" She held my gaze. "I'm trying to."
That night I came home to find Claire in the living room, a glass of wine in her hand, staring at nothing. "Hey," I said. She looked up, and I saw something in her expression I couldn't quite read. Sadness, maybe, or resignation. "We need to talk," she said. My stomach dropped. "Okay." She gestured to the couch. I sat down, keeping a careful distance between us, a distance that had become habitual over the past few weeks. "Where were you today?" she asked. "I told you I had a meeting with a client." "What client?" I hesitated, just a fraction of a second too long. "Ethan." Her voice was steady, but I heard the tension underneath. "I called your office. They said you weren't there." I could have lied again, could have come up with some explanation, a meeting off-site, a mistake with the receptionist. But looking at Claire, at the woman I'd spent 15 years with, I found I didn't have the energy. I was at a coffee shop. Alone? No. She closed her eyes, and I watched her absorb it, the confirmation of whatever she'd been suspecting. "Who is she?" Claire asked. "Her name is Mara, and nothing's happened. We just talk." "You just talk," she repeated, and there was something brittle in her voice.
You've been lying to me for weeks so you can go to a coffee shop and talk to another woman? Yes. Jesus, Ethan. She set down her wine glass, her hands shaking slightly. Do you understand how that sounds? I know, but it's the truth. I haven't touched her. I haven't. That's not the point. Her voice rose, and I realized this was the closest we'd come to a real fight in months, maybe years. The point is that you're sharing something with her that you won't share with me. The point is that you'd rather lie and sneak around than talk to your own wife. I tried talking to you. When? When did you try? A few weeks ago, when I asked you if you'd ever wanted me. She stared at me. That's what this is about? That conversation? That conversation and everything else. The fact that you chose me because I was safe, because I wasn't going to blow up your world. Ethan, the fact that I've spent our entire marriage being what you needed instead of being someone you wanted. That's not fair, isn't it? I stood up, needing to move, needing space. You said it yourself, Claire. You settled. You chose me because I was the reasonable choice after all the bad ones. And I've spent 15 years trying to be okay with that, trying to convince myself that being needed was enough. It should be enough, she said, and her voice broke. Being loved should be enough. You love what I do for you, not who I am. That's not true. Then tell me. I turned to face her. Tell me one thing about me that you love that has nothing to do with how I make your life easier. She opened her mouth, closed it. The silence stretched between us. Confirmation of everything I'd been afraid to name. I love you, she said finally, desperately. I chose to marry you. I chose to build a life with you.
Because I was safe. Because you were good. Because I knew I could trust you. But you never wanted me, I said. Not the way you wanted him. The guy from college. The one who made you lose your mind. Her face crumpled. That wasn't love, Ethan. That was chaos. That was what love feels like when it's real, when it's not just a practical decision. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? I sat back down, suddenly exhausted. I've spent my entire life being the guy people choose when they've learned their lesson, when they're ready to be sensible. And I thought that was what I wanted. I thought being reliable was the same as being valued. It is, Ethan. God, Ethan, do you have any idea how lucky you are? How lucky we are? Most people spend their whole lives chasing some fantasy of passion, and they end up miserable and alone. We have something real, something that lasts. We have something safe, I said, and I don't think that's the same thing. She wiped at her eyes, anger and hurt warring on her face. So what? You're going to throw away 15 years because you've decided that what we have isn't exciting enough? It's not about excitement. Then what is it about? It's about being seen, I said quietly. It's about being with someone who looks at you and sees you, not just the life you can give them. And she sees you? The bitterness in her voice was sharp. This woman you've known for what, a few weeks? Yes, I said. She does. Claire stared at me, and I watched something shift in her expression. A kind of understanding, maybe, or surrender. You're already gone. Claire. No,
You are. Maybe you haven't slept with her. Maybe you haven't even kissed her, but you're already gone. I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't, because she was right. I didn't see Mara for a week after that. I told myself it was the right thing to do, that I needed to figure out my marriage, needed to give Claire the attention she deserved, needed to stop running away from my life. But the truth was, I was afraid of what it meant that I missed Mara more than I missed my wife when we were in the same room. Afraid of what it meant that I'd been more honest with her in a handful of conversations than I'd been with Claire in 15 years. Afraid that if I kept seeing her, I'd have to make a choice I wasn't ready to make. The week dragged. Claire and I moved through the house like roommates, polite and distant. She stopped asking where I was going. I stopped making excuses. We were giving each other space, I suppose. Or maybe we were just giving up. On Thursday afternoon, I sat in my office and stared at my computer screen, not seeing it. All I could think about was the coffee shop, the table by the window, the way Mara listened, really listened, like my words mattered. My phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. You haven't been to the coffee shop. M. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed, "How did you get my number?" You left your business card on the table last week. Figured you wouldn't mind. I should have minded, should have been angry at the presumption. Instead, I felt something loosen in my chest. I can't keep doing this, I typed. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I know. Then, but I miss talking to you. I closed my eyes, phone in my hand, and felt the full weight of it, the impossibility of what was happening, the inevitability of it. I miss it too, I typed back. Then come. Or don't. But don't stay away because you think it's the right thing to do. Stay away because you actually want to. I looked at the message for a long time. Then I grabbed my keys and left.
She was sitting at our table when I walked in, and the relief on her face when she saw me was so naked, so unguarded, that I had to stop myself from going straight to her. "Hey," I said, sitting down. "Hey." For a moment, we just looked at each other, and I felt the weight of everything unsaid. "I told my wife about you," I said. Mara's expression didn't change. And she thinks I've already left. That even if I'm still in the house, I'm already gone. Are you? I thought about Claire, about the life we'd built, about all the reasons I should stay. Then I thought about sitting here with Mara, feeling more myself than I had in years. "I don't know," I said. "I keep trying to convince myself that I'm just going through something, that this is a midlife crisis or burnout or something temporary that I'll get over." But you don't believe that? No. Why not? "Because I've felt this way my entire life," I said. "I've always felt like I was playing a part, being the person everyone needed me to be. And it worked, you know? It made people happy. It made my life easy. But not yours," Mara said softly. "Not mine." She reached across the table and touched my hand. Just a brief touch, her fingers against mine. It was the first time we'd touched beyond handshakes,
and the contact sent something electric through me. "I need to tell you something," she said, pulling her hand back. "And I need you to really hear it. Okay? I'm not going to be the reason you leave your marriage. I'm not going to be the excuse you use to blow up your life. If you leave, it has to be because you need to leave, because staying is killing you, not because of me. I know. Do you? Because it's easy to make someone else the reason. It's easy to say, I met someone and everything changed. But that's not what's happening here." "Then what is happening?" She looked at me, her eyes serious. "You're waking up. And it's painful, and it's scary, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. And I can be here, as a friend, as someone who understands, but I can't be your solution. You have to figure out what you want, independent of me. And if what I want is you..." The question hung between us, too honest, too raw. Mara was quiet for a long moment, and I saw something complicated move across her face, desire and caution and fear all at once. "You have to do the work first," she said finally. "You have to figure out who you are when you're not being what everyone else needs you to be, and you have to decide if you can live with the consequences of choosing yourself. What if I can't? Then you stay. You go back to your marriage and you make it work, and you stop coming here."
I don't think I can do that either. I know, she said, and there was sadness in her voice. That's the hard part. That night, I lay in the guest room, which had become my room over the past few weeks, and thought about Mara's words. You have to choose yourself. It sounded so simple, but I'd spent 41 years doing the opposite, being good for my parents, being reliable for my teachers, my bosses, my friends, being steady for Claire. I'd built my entire identity around being the person other people could count on, and now Mara was asking me to tear that down, to choose desire over duty, to risk everything for something as uncertain as wanting to be seen. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Mara. For what it's worth, I think you're brave. I don't feel brave, I typed back. That's usually when you are. I stared at the message, at those few words that somehow made me feel less alone. Then I typed, I don't want to stop seeing you. The response came quickly. Then don't. But I don't know what this is, what we're doing. Neither do I. But I know I like who I am when I'm with you, and I think you do too. She was right. I did. When I was with Mara, I wasn't performing, wasn't managing, wasn't carefully calibrating my responses to make someone else comfortable. I was just me, a version of myself I'd almost forgotten existed. Same time next week, I typed. I'll be there. I set the phone down and closed my eyes, and I knew, lying there in the darkness, that I'd crossed a line. Maybe not physically, but emotionally I was already gone. Claire had been right about that, and I didn't know how to come back. Didn't know if I wanted to. Chapter 5. The Marriage Breaks Quietly. The house felt different. Not empty. We were both still there, moving through rooms, sharing space, but hollow. Like a building, after everyone's gone home, lights still on, but no life inside. Claire stopped cooking elaborate dinners. I stopped asking about her day. We existed in parallel, our routines overlapping, but never quite touching. It was, in its way, the most honest our marriage had ever been. On a Sunday morning, 2 weeks after our confrontation, I found Claire in the kitchen making coffee. She was wearing one of my old college sweatshirts, something she used to do when we first started dating. It had felt intimate then, like we were building a shared life. Now it just looked borrowed. "Morning," I said. "Morning." I poured myself coffee, and we stood there in silence, both of us staring out the window at nothing in particular. The October trees were nearly bare now. Winter was coming. "I've been thinking," Claire said. I waited. "I think we should see a therapist." I turned to look at her. She was still staring out the window, her hands wrapped around her mug. "Okay," I said. She glanced at me, surprised. "Okay? Just like that? If that's what you want?" "It's not about what I want, Ethan. It's about saving our marriage, about figuring out how to fix this." I wanted to tell her there was nothing to fix, that the problem wasn't a crack in the foundation, it was the foundation itself. But I could see the hope in her eyes, fragile and desperate, and I couldn't take that from her. Not yet. "Okay," I said again. "We'll see a therapist." Dr. Rachel Chen had an office in a renovated Victorian, all cream walls and comfortable furniture that probably cost more than our couch. She was in her 50s, I guessed, with short gray hair and an expression that was kind but unreadable. "So," she said, once we were all seated, "tell me what brings you here." Claire looked at me. I looked at my hands. "We're having some difficulties," Claire said finally. "Communication issues. Ethan's been distant, and I'm trying to understand why." Dr. Chen nodded, writing something down. "Ethan, how would you describe what's happening?" I thought about the dozen different ways I could answer that question, all the diplomatic phrasings, the careful explanations. "I don't think my wife wants me," I said. "Not really. I think she wants the life I provide, the stability, but not me." Silence. Claire's face went white. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" I looked at her. "Tell me the last time you wanted me in a way that had nothing to do with what I could do for you." "That's not fair. That's not—" She turned to Dr. Chen. "He's been having an emotional affair with some woman he met at a coffee shop. That's what this is really about." "I haven't touched her." "That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" My voice was calm, which somehow made it worse. "The point is that I've spent 15 years being a good husband, and you've spent 15 years being comfortable. And now that I'm asking for something more, you're acting like I'm the one who broke the rules. You are breaking the rules. Can we pause for a moment?" Dr. Chen's voice was gentle but firm. We both stopped, breathing hard, surprised by our own intensity. "I'm hearing a lot of pain from both of you," Dr. Chen said, "and I think before we go further, we need to establish what you both want from this process. Claire, let's start with you. What do you hope to achieve through therapy?" Claire wiped at her eyes. "I want to fix this. I want to understand what happened to us. We were fine, and then suddenly—" Her voice cracked. "I want my husband back!" Dr. Chen nodded, then turned to me. "Ethan." I thought about it, about what I wanted, what I actually hoped to gain from sitting in this office and dredging up everything I'd been trying not to say. "I don't think my wife wants me," I said.
Not really. I think she wants the life I provide, the stability, but not me. And if there isn't, Dr. Chen asked, the question hung in the air. Then I need to know that too, I said. Claire made a sound, half sob, half gasp, and I felt it like a physical blow. But I couldn't take it back, couldn't soften it, because it was true. We went to therapy every Tuesday evening for 3 weeks, 50-minute sessions where Dr. Chen asked careful questions and we gave painful answers, and nothing changed. No, that wasn't right. Everything changed. We just changed in opposite directions. In our third session, Dr. Chen asked Claire to describe what she loved about me. Claire thought about it, then smiled. He's dependable, kind. He never makes me worry. When I come home after a hard day, I know he'll be there. I know he'll listen and help with dinner and not add to the stress. He makes my life easier. Dr. Chen nodded, writing. Then she turned to me. How does that make you feel, Ethan? Like a service, I said. Like something you pay for because it's useful. Claire's smile fell. That's not what I meant. I know, but that's what it sounds like. I'm trying to say that I value you, that I appreciate you appreciate what I do, not who I am. That's the same thing. It's not, I said, and the certainty in my voice surprised even me. It's really not. Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. Ethan, can you tell Claire what you wish she'd said? I looked at my wife, at this woman I'd spent half my life with, and tried to find the words. I wish you'd said you love the way I think, or the way I see the world. I wish you'd said there's something about me specifically that you can't imagine living without, something that isn't about stability or reliability or making your life easier. But those things matter, Claire said, her voice rising. Those are the things that make a marriage work. That's what real love is. Partnership, reliability, showing up, not some fantasy of passion that burns out in 6 months. I'm not asking for fantasy. I'm asking to be wanted. You are wanted as a husband, as a provider, as the guy who doesn't rock the boat, but not as a person, not as someone you desire. The word desire landed between us like something forbidden. Claire's face flushed. We're not 25 anymore, Ethan. Desire isn't... It's not the foundation of a marriage. Maybe it should be, I said quietly. After that session, we drove home in silence. Claire went straight to the bedroom and closed the door. I stood in the kitchen, key still in hand, and felt the weight of it, the impossibility of bridging this gap. We wanted different things. Or maybe we'd always wanted different things and I'd just been too compliant to notice. My phone buzzed. A text from Mara. How did therapy go? I told her about the sessions last week during our Thursday coffee. She'd listened without judgment, without trying to influence me one way or another. About as well as expected, I typed back. That bad? Worse. Claire thinks I'm asking for something unreasonable, that adult love shouldn't need passion. What do you think? I stared at the question, and I realized I had already decided. Passion wasn't the right word for what I wanted. It was too fleeting, too shallow. What I wanted was to be chosen deliberately, to be wanted with intention, to be with someone who looked at me and saw something worth desiring, not just something safe to rely on. I think she's right that what we had could work. For a lot of people, it would be enough. But I don't think I can live with enough anymore. The response came quickly. Then you have your answer. Do I? You do? You're just afraid to say it out loud. She was right. I was terrified. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, and thought about the years ahead. 20, 30, maybe 40 more years of moving through routines with Claire, of being appreciated but not desired, of being the steady presence in her life while some part of me slowly died. I thought about Mara, about the way she looked at me like I was someone worth knowing, about how when I was with her, I felt awake, And I thought about my father, coming home every night at 6:15 for 40 years, and I wondered if he'd ever felt this way, if he'd ever lain awake wondering what his life would have been if he'd chosen something other than safety. I wondered if that was all we were, a family of men who chose safety over desire, who built careful lives and called it success. Around 2 in the morning, I heard the bedroom door open, footsteps in the hallway. Then Claire was standing in the doorway of the guest room, backlit by the hall light. "Ethan?" I sat up. "Yeah? Can we talk? Now? Please." I followed her to the living room. She sat on the couch, pulling a blanket around her shoulders. I sat in the chair across from her, keeping distance between us. "I can't do this anymore," she said. My heart stopped. "What?" "This." She gestured between us. "The therapy, the trying, the pretending that if we just work hard enough we can fix this." "Claire." "No, listen. I've been thinking about what you said today, about wanting to be desired, and I realized that I don't know how to give you that, because you're right. I didn't choose you because I couldn't help myself. I chose you because you were the smart choice, the right choice, the choice that made sense." "I know," I said softly. "And I thought that was love. I thought choosing someone deliberately, with your eyes open, knowing exactly what you were getting, I thought that was more mature than whatever I felt for Ryan in college, more real. Maybe it is, for some people. But not for you. Not for me," I agreed. She pulled the blanket tighter. "Do you love her, this woman?" I thought about Mara, about our conversations, about the way she saw me, about how I felt more like myself with her than I had in years. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I know that being with her makes me feel like a person instead of a function, but I don't know if that's love or just relief." "But you want to find out." It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said.
Claire nodded slowly, and I saw tears streaming down her face. "I can't compete with that, with the fantasy of being wanted. I can't compete with someone who doesn't have 15 years of daily life and compromises and boring routines attached to them. It's not about competing. It is, though, and I've already lost. Because you're right, Ethan. I do love what you provide, more than who you are. Not because you're not worth loving, but because I don't know how to separate the two. You've been so good at being what I needed that I stopped seeing anything else." The admission hung between us, more honest than anything we'd said in therapy. "I'm sorry," I said. "Me too." She wiped at her eyes. "I thought I was building something that would last. I thought safe meant strong." "It did. It does. Just not for us." "No," she agreed. "Not for us." We sat in silence for a long time, the house settling around us. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Winter was definitely coming. "What happens now?" Claire asked finally. I thought about it. About logistics and lawyers and dividing up a life we'd spent 15 years building. "I don't know," I said. "I've never done this before." "Neither have I. Maybe we should figure it out together. One last thing we do as a team." She laughed, a wet, broken sound. "That's very you, making the divorce amicable. Would you prefer I make it difficult?" "No, but sometimes I wish you would. I wish you'd fight for this, for us, with even a fraction of the passion you have for leaving." "I'm not leaving with passion. I'm leaving because staying is killing me." "I know." She stood up, pulling the blanket around her like armor. "I'm going to bed. We can talk about the details tomorrow or next week,
Whenever. Okay. She started toward the hallway, then stopped. Ethan? Yeah. For what it's worth, I did love you. I do love you. It just wasn't the kind you needed. I know. And that's not your fault. You can't manufacture desire. No, she said softly. You can't. She went back to the bedroom, and I sat alone in the dark, feeling the full weight of what we'd just done. We'd ended our marriage, not with screaming or accusations or broken dishes, just with honesty, with the quiet acknowledgement that sometimes love isn't enough, that sometimes being safe isn't the same as being right, and that after 15 years of trying to be good for someone, I needed to figure out what it meant to be good for myself.
Chapter 6. Physical Separation. Emotional Clarity. I moved out on a Thursday. Not far, just to a furnished apartment 2 miles from the house, the kind of place designed for people in transition, corporate relocations, divorces, lives in flux. The furniture was beige and functional, the walls blank, the refrigerator empty except for a bottle of water left by the previous tenant. It should have felt depressing. Instead, it felt like I could breathe for the first time in months. Claire and I had agreed to keep things simple. I'd taken my clothes, my laptop, a few books. Everything else could wait. We'd told our families the previous weekend, difficult conversations that had left everyone confused and concerned. My mother had cried. Claire's mother had looked at me like I'd betrayed a sacred trust. Maybe I had. But sitting in that bare apartment, looking at the unpacked boxes and the blank walls, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. I texted Mara that night. I moved out today. The response came within minutes. How are you doing? Honestly, I don't know. Feels strange, but not bad. Want company? I could bring takeout. I stared at the message, feeling the significance of it. She'd never suggested meeting anywhere but the coffee shop. This was different. This was stepping into my space, my life, without the neutral territory between us. You don't have to do that. I know. But I want to, if you want me to. I looked around the empty apartment, then back at my phone. Thai food? Perfect. Text me your address. She arrived an hour later with enough food for 3 people and a bottle of wine. I didn't know what you liked, she said, setting the bags on the counter. So I got everything. This is too much. Then we'll have leftovers. She looked around the apartment, taking it in. Very transitional. That's the word for it. How does it feel, being here? I thought about it. Quiet, but in a good way. Like I can hear myself think. She nodded, understanding immediately. That's how I felt when I first moved out. Like I'd been holding my breath for years and finally remembered how to exhale. We unpacked the food and sat on the floor. There was a couch, but somehow the floor felt more appropriate for this moment. More honest. So, Mara said, opening a container of pad thai. Tell me about the last few weeks. You've been quiet at coffee shop. It's been a lot. Therapy, conversations, coming to terms with the fact that I'm actually doing this. Having second thoughts? No, but having all the other thoughts. About who I am without her. Without the structure of that life. That's the scary part, Mara said. Realizing you have to define yourself instead of letting circumstances do it. How long did it take you after your divorce? She thought about it, chewing. Honestly, I'm still figuring it out. It's been 3 years, and some days I still catch myself making decisions based on what my ex-husband would have wanted, or avoiding things because he didn't like them.
It's like his voice is still in my head. Does it get easier? Yes, but not in a straight line. Some days you feel like you figured everything out. Other days you wake up and have no idea who you are. She paused. But even on the hard days, I've never regretted leaving. Because at least I'm living my own life now, even if I'm still learning what that means. I watched her talk, the way her hands moved when she explained something, the directness in her eyes. There was something magnetic about her, not in a performative way, but in her absolute comfort with being honest. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Always."
Why me? Why did you keep coming back to that coffee shop? She set down her fork, considering the question seriously. Because you were the first person in a long time who seemed as lost as I felt. And not in a broken way, in a waking up way, like you were finally seeing something you'd been refusing to look at. That's not very flattering. No, but it's true. And the more we talked, the more I realized you weren't just lost, you were brave. You were willing to ask questions that most people spend their whole lives avoiding. I don't feel brave. No one ever does. That's how you know it's bravery and not just confidence. We ate in comfortable silence for a while, and I felt the strangeness of this, sitting on the floor of my new apartment with a woman who, a few months ago, had been a complete stranger. Now she felt like the only person who understood what I was going through. I told Claire about you. Really told her, not just that I'd been meeting someone, but that being with you made me feel seen in a way I'd never felt before. How did she take it? She said she couldn't compete with the fantasy of being wanted. Mara winced. Ouch. Yeah, but she wasn't wrong. That's what this is, isn't it? A fantasy. The idea that there's someone out there who will want me for the right reasons. Is it a fantasy? I don't know. Maybe. I've spent so long being the safe choice that I don't know if I'm capable of being anything else. Mara set down her wine glass and looked at me directly. Can I tell you what I see? Please. I see someone who's been performing his entire life, who learned early that being good meant being easy, and who built a whole identity around that. And now you're starting to realize that being easy doesn't mean being loved. It just means being convenient. The accuracy of it stole my breath. And I see someone, she continued, who's terrified that if he stops being convenient, no one will want him at all. That the real version of him, the one who has needs and desires and opinions that might inconvenience other people, is somehow not good enough. You see all that? I lived all that. For 10 years. So yeah, I see it. I was quiet, absorbing her words. But here's what else I see, Mara said, her voice softer now. I see someone who's choosing himself for the first time, who's willing to risk everything he's built to find out who he actually is. And that's not a fantasy, Ethan. That's real. That's the realest thing I've seen in a long time. I looked at her, this woman who'd somehow become essential to my life, and I felt something shift inside me, a recognition that went deeper than attraction or comfort. I wanted her, not just as a friend or confidant or mirror for my transformation. I wanted her, but I also knew I wasn't ready. Not yet, because Maura was right. I needed to figure out who I was first. Needed to do the work of becoming someone who could be wanted for the right reasons. Someone who could want someone else for the right reasons too. Thank you. For what? For seeing me. For being patient with me. For not pushing. She smiled. I told you, I don't want what's left over. I want what you choose. And you're not ready to choose anything yet.
How do you know?
You figure out who you are when no one's watching, what you actually like, what you want, what makes you feel alive. She paused. And then, when you know that, when you're not running from something, but towards something, then you can choose. And if I choose you? The question hung between us, heavy with possibility. Then I'll be here, she said simply, but not before. I meant what I said, Ethan. I won't be the reason you left. I won't be the escape. I'll only be the choice. She left around midnight, and I stood in the doorway watching her walk to her car. She turned before getting in, waved once, and drove away. I closed the door and stood in the empty apartment, feeling the weight of her words. Figure out who you are when no one's watching, what you actually like, what you want, what makes you feel alive. I looked around the space, at the beige furniture and blank walls and unpacked boxes, at the life I hadn't yet built. And for the first time, and as long as I could remember, I felt something like excitement. Not about Mara, though she was part of it. About myself. About the possibility that I could become someone who didn't just accommodate and adjust and make things easy for everyone else. Someone who had edges, opinions, desires that weren't negotiable. Someone worth wanting. The next few weeks passed in a kind of suspended animation. I went to work, came home to the apartment, ordered takeout, read books I'd been meaning to read for years, watched movies Claire had never wanted to see, stayed up late, not because I was anxious, but because I could. I stopped shaving every day, started running in the mornings instead of the gym, bought art for the walls. Nothing expensive, just prints from a gallery I'd passed a dozen times but never entered. Small things, but each one felt like a tiny rebellion against the person I'd been. Claire and I texted occasionally about logistics, lawyers, paperwork, divining assets. The conversations were cordial, almost friendly. We were good at being practical, even at the end. One night, she called. "Hey," she said when I answered. "Hey, I'm going through the storage unit, found some of your old things from college. The notebooks, your writing. I'd forgotten about those, the stories and poems from when I'd thought I might become a writer. You can throw them out. Are you sure? Some of it's really good, Ethan." I was quiet, surprised by the compliment, by the fact that she'd read them. "You read them?" I asked. "Years ago, when we first moved in together. You were at work, and I found them in a box." She paused. "I didn't know you wanted to be a writer. I didn't really. It was just something I did. You were good at it, though. Really good. I remember thinking—" She stopped. "What?" "I remember thinking you should pursue it, that you had something. But then I thought about how impractical it was, how hard it would be to make a living, and I never said anything." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I've been thinking about what you said, about being wanted versus being needed. And I realized I did the same thing with your writing that I did with everything else. I saw it through the lens of what was practical, what made sense. I never asked if it was what you actually wanted." I sat down on the couch, phone pressed to my ear, feeling the weight of her admission.
Chapter 7. Choosing Desire. Spring came slowly. I'd been living alone for 4 months when I woke one morning to realize the trees outside my apartment were budding. Winter was over. The divorce papers had been signed 2 weeks earlier. Amicable, efficient, exactly what everyone expected from us. My mother had called afterward, her voice tight with disappointment. "Are you sure about this, Ethan? Marriage is work. You can't just give up." But I hadn't given up. I'd finally started trying.
I was different now. Not dramatically. There was no radical transformation, no sudden revelation, but the small changes had accumulated into something I barely recognized. I'd started writing again. Just fragments at first, observations, memories, things I noticed while running in the mornings. Then longer pieces, a short story about a man who realizes he's been living in the conditional tense his entire life. An essay about the difference between being chosen and being wanted. I submitted the essay to a literary journal on a whim, expecting nothing. They accepted it. It was a small publication, the kind that paid in copies instead of money. But seeing my name in print, my words taking up space on a page, felt like proof that I existed outside of other people's needs. I'd also reconnected with Jake, my college roommate. We'd drifted apart over the years, the way people do when their lives move in different directions. But I called him one night, and we met for beers, and within 10 minutes it was like no time had passed. "You seem different," he said, studying me across the table. "Different how?" "I don't know. More present. Like you're actually here instead of just going through the motions." Is that what I was doing before? Going through motions? He laughed. "Dude, you've been going through motions since sophomore year, when you decided to be practical instead of interesting. That's harsh."
It's true. Remember when you wanted to move to Portland after graduation, work in a bookstore, write on the side, figure things out? And then you just didn't. You got that project management job and settled into being responsible. I did remember. I'd forgotten I'd ever wanted anything else. Claire didn't want to move to Portland, I said. You weren't even with Claire yet when you made that decision. You just knew you should want stability, should want a career path and a 401k and all that adult shit. And you were so good at convincing yourself it was what you wanted. It wasn't all bad. I had a good life. Yeah, safe, comfortable, completely devoid of risk. He leaned forward. But this, whatever you're doing now, this is better. You're actually living instead of just managing existence. I thought about that, about the difference between living and managing existence. And I realized he was right. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I was actually living. I saw Mara twice a week, sometimes 3 times. Still at the coffee shop mostly, though we'd also started meeting for walks. Long, rambling conversations through parks and along the river, talking about everything and nothing. She'd started showing me her work, graphic design projects for clients, but also personal art she made just for herself. Abstract digital pieces full of color and movement. "I never show these to anyone," she said one afternoon, scrolling through images on her tablet. "They're too personal." "Why are you showing me?" She looked at me, her expression serious. "Because I want you to see me too. Not just the version of me that's figured everything out. The messy part, the part that's still looking." I understood what she meant. We'd both been performing for so long, her and her marriage, me and mine, that showing the unfinished parts felt like the most intimate thing we could do. "They're beautiful," I said, and I meant it. "You don't have to say that." "I know, but they are. They're honest. You can see the searching in them." She smiled, pleased and embarrassed. "That's exactly what they are. Searching." We kept walking, and I felt it again, that pull toward her, stronger now than it had been before. Not just attraction, though that was there, not just recognition, something deeper. Want. Real want. The kind that came from knowing someone, from seeing who they actually were, and choosing them anyway. On a Thursday evening in late April, I invited her to dinner. Not at a restaurant, at my apartment. I'd been cooking more, another small act of self-discovery, and I wanted to make something for her. "Are you sure?" she asked when I suggested it.
That's different from coffee shop conversations. I know, but I want to. She was quiet for a moment. Okay, but I need to know, are we still waiting, or are we done waiting? The directness of it caught me off guard. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe somewhere in between? There is no in between, Ethan. Either you're ready to choose this or you're not. And both are okay. But I need to know what this dinner means. I thought about it. About the months I had spent learning to be alone. About the person I'd been becoming. About whether I was ready to be wanted and to want someone back without it being an escape or a reaction. I want to find out, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm ready, but I want to try. She considered this, then nodded. Okay, Thursday. What time? 7? I'll be there.
I spent all day Thursday preparing. Not just the food, though I made that too. Salmon with roasted vegetables and a salad. Nothing fancy, but done with care. But I also cleaned the apartment, put on music, tried to make the space feel like mine, like somewhere I actually lived instead of just inhabited. Around 6:30, I looked around and realized I was nervous. Not the kind of nervous you get before a first date, performative and shallow. This was deeper. The nervousness of showing someone who you actually are and not knowing if it would be enough. Mara arrived at 7 exactly, holding a bottle of wine and wearing a dark green dress I'd never seen before. "Hey," she said. "Hey." She came inside, and for a moment we just stood there, both of us aware that this was different, that something had shifted. "It smells good," she said. "Thanks. I hope it tastes good too." "I'm sure it will." We moved into the kitchen, and I poured wine while she looked at the art on my walls, the prints I'd chosen weeks ago. "I like this one," she said, pointing to an abstract piece, all blues and grays. "Yeah? It feels like movement without destination, like it's okay to not know where you're going." That's exactly why I picked it. She turned to look at me, and something in her expression made my chest tighten. "You've done good work," she said quietly, "these past few months, building a life that's actually yours." "I had a good teacher." "I didn't teach you anything. I just watched you figure it out." "You did more than watch." She held my gaze for a moment longer, then smiled. "So, this dinner you've been promising, should we eat?" We sat at my small dining table, the first time I'd actually used it, and talked the way we always did, about books we'd read, places we wanted to go, the strange architecture of our own minds. But there was something else underneath it now, an awareness of bodies, of proximity, the way her hand moved when she talked, the way she laughed at something I said, unguarded and real. "Can I ask you something?" I said, somewhere between the main course and dessert. "Always. Are you scared of this?" She thought about it, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. "Yes, but not for the reasons you might think." "What reasons?" "I'm not scared of being hurt. I've been hurt before. I survived. I'm scared of wanting something too much, of building it up in my head until it can't possibly live up to what I imagined." "Is that what you're doing? With me?" "Sometimes, when I let myself think about it." She met my eyes. "But then I remember that the best parts of being with you have been the ones I didn't imagine, the conversations I didn't plan, the moments when you surprised me." "I don't feel very surprising." "You are, though. You're surprising in your honesty, in your willingness to keep asking questions even when they're uncomfortable. Most people stop asking. They decide on an answer and stick with it because it's easier. But you keep looking. Is that a good thing?" I think so, but it means you're never settled, never fully comfortable. Is that what you want? Someone who's never comfortable?
She smiled. I want someone who's willing to be uncomfortable in order to be real. And that's you. I felt something loosen in my chest, some final piece of resistance falling away. I want you, I said. The words hung between us, simple and enormous. I know, she said. Not because you're saving me, not because you're helping me escape, but because when I'm with you, I feel like myself, and I like who that is. Ethan, wait, let me finish. I took a breath. I spent 40 years being what other people needed, and these past few months, I've been trying to figure out who I am when I'm not doing that. And what I've learned is I want to be someone who chooses things, who moves toward what he wants instead of away from what he doesn't. And what do you want? You. This, whatever we could be if we stopped waiting. Mara was quiet, and I saw something complex move across her face, hope and fear and desire all at once. I need you to be sure, she said finally, because I meant what I said. I don't want to be the transition, the rebound, the person you choose because you're not ready to be alone. You're not. How do you know? Because I've been alone for months, and I chose to keep being alone until I was ready to choose something else, to choose someone. I leaned forward. I'm choosing you, Mara, not because you're convenient or safe or because you make my life easier. I'm choosing you because I want you, because I look at you and feel something I've never felt before. What's that? Like I'm willing to be inconvenient, to be difficult, to risk everything I've built just to find out what this could be. She smiled, and there were tears in her eyes. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. It's true. I know. That's what makes it romantic. She stood up, and I stood with her, and suddenly we were close, closer than we'd ever been. I could smell her perfume, something subtle and warm, could see the exact color of her eyes, brown with flecks of gold. I'm scared, I said. Me too. Good. That means it matters. She laughed, and then she reached up and touched my face, just a soft touch, her hand against my cheek. The first time she'd touched me like that. I want you too, she said. I have for months, but I needed you to choose yourself first, to know who you were before you chose me. And now? Now I think you know. I closed the distance between us and kissed her. It wasn't tentative or careful. It wasn't the kind of kiss you give someone when you're not sure. It was certain, deliberate, the kiss of someone who'd made a choice and meant it. She kissed me back, her hands moving to my shoulders, pulling me closer, and I felt it, the thing I'd been missing my entire life, the thing I hadn't known I was allowed to want. I felt wanted. Not needed, not accommodated, not tolerated. Wanted. For who I actually was. Later, we sat on the couch, her body curved into mine, both of us quiet in the aftermath of that kiss. What happens now?
she asked. I don't know. I've never done this before. Done what? Chosen someone because I wanted to, instead of because I should. She lifted her head to look at me. How does it feel? I thought about it. About the months of therapy and separation and learning to be alone. About the fear and uncertainty and slow work of becoming someone new. Terrifying, I said, but right. Yeah, she said, settling back against me. That sounds about right. We stayed like that for a long time, and I felt something I'd never felt in my marriage, even in the good years. Peace. Not the peace of safety or comfort or things going according to plan, the peace of being exactly where I wanted to be, with someone who wanted me there.
She left around midnight, and I stood in the doorway watching her walk to her car, the same way I had months ago. But this time, before she got in, she came back and kissed me again. Thursday, she said against my mouth. Thursday what? I want to see you Thursday, and Saturday, and whenever else we can. I smiled. That sounds like a relationship. It is a relationship, if you want it to be. I want it to be. Good. She kissed me once more, quick and certain. Then I'll see you Thursday. I watched her drive away, then went back inside and sat in the dark apartment, feeling the weight of what I'd just done. I'd chosen something for myself. I'd chosen desire over safety. I'd chosen to be wanted. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I'd made the right choice. Not because it was easy or comfortable or what everyone expected, but because it was mine. Chapter 8. Entering a relationship without hiding. The first time I introduced Mara to someone from my old life, I almost backed out. It was 3 weeks after our first kiss, and Jake had invited me to a barbecue at his house. Bring her, he'd said when I mentioned I was seeing someone. I want to meet the woman who finally got you to stop being so goddamned sensible. I hesitated, not because I was ashamed. The divorce was finalized, there was no infidelity, no scandal, but because bringing Mara meant claiming this relationship publicly, meant standing in front of people who'd known me as Claire's husband and saying, "This is who I am now." "You don't have to," Mara said when I told her about the invitation. We were in her apartment. I'd been spending more time there, slowly, carefully, learning the geography of her life. "If you're not ready—" "I am ready," I said. "I think. I'm just nervous." "About what?" "About people judging. About them thinking I left my marriage for you." "Did you?" "No, I left my marriage because staying was killing me. You were just proof that something else was possible." She came over and sat beside me on her couch, taking my hand. "Then that's what you tell them, if they ask." "What if they don't believe me?" "Then they don't believe you, but that's their problem, not yours." She made it sound simple, and maybe it was. Maybe I'd been overcomplicating things my entire life. We went to the barbecue on a Saturday afternoon. Jake lived in a house in the suburbs with his wife Rachel and their 2 kids. The backyard was full of people, neighbors, friends from college, co-workers, the kind of casual gathering I'd attended dozens of times with Claire. But walking in with Mara felt different. Jake greeted us at the gate, his eyes immediately going to Mara with undisguised curiosity. "You must be the famous Mara," he said, extending his hand. "Famous?" She glanced at me.
"Jake's mentioned you," Jake said, grinning. "Rachel, come meet Ethan's girlfriend." Girlfriend. The word landed strangely. I'd been married for 15 years. I'd forgotten what it felt like to have a girlfriend, the newness of it, the tentative quality. Rachel emerged from the kitchen wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was warm and curious, asking Mara about her work, where she lived, how we'd met. Normal questions, but I found myself tense, waiting for the judgment. It never came. Instead, Rachel smiled and said, "It's good to see Ethan happy. He's been different lately. More here." "That's what I told him," Jake said. "He used to have this look like he was always somewhere else. Now he actually shows up." I felt Mara squeeze my hand, a small gesture, but it steadied me. "Come on," Rachel said. "I'll introduce you around."
The afternoon unfolded in a way I hadn't expected. People were kind. Curious, yes. A few asked about Claire, about the divorce, about how I was doing. But no one was cruel. No one suggested I had made a mistake or thrown away something precious. Mostly they seemed relieved. "I always thought you two seemed like roommates," one of Jake's neighbors said, a woman I'd met at previous barbecues. "Like you were friends who got married because it made sense, not because you couldn't live without each other." The observation stung, but it was also true. I watched Mara across the yard, talking with Rachel and a few other women. She was laughing at something, her whole face lighting up, and I felt it again. That pull, that certainty. This was different. This was real in a way my marriage had never been. Not because Claire was wrong or I was wrong, but because we'd been wrong together. We'd built something functional instead of vital, something that worked on paper but not in practice. "You look happy," Jake said, appearing beside me with 2 beers. He handed me one. "I am," I said. "It's strange. I feel guilty about it sometimes." "Why?" "Because I'm happier now than I was in my marriage, and that feels like admitting I wasted 15 years. Jake took a long drink, considering. "Or maybe it means you learned what you didn't want. That's not a waste. That's education. Expensive education. All the important lessons are." He gestured toward Mara. "She's good for you. I can tell." "How?" "Because you're not performing right now. You're just being. And I've known you for 20 years, man. This is the first time I've seen you just be." I thought about that. About all the years I'd spent managing other people's expectations, calibrating my behavior, making myself easy to love. "I don't know how to do this," I admitted. "How to be in a relationship where I'm not trying to be what someone needs." "So don't try. Just see what happens when you're honest." "What if honest isn't enough?" Jake laughed. "Then it's the wrong person. But I don't think that's the problem here." That evening, Mara and I drove back to my apartment. "That was nice," she said. "Your friends are good people. They liked you." "How can you tell?" "Rachel asked for your number." "She never does that unless she actually wants to be friends with someone." Mara smiled, pleased. "She's great. They all were." She paused. "You were nervous, though. I could feel it." "Was it that obvious?" "Only to me, because I know you." She reached over and took my hand. "What were you afraid of?" "Judgment. People thinking I'd made a mistake, that I'd thrown away something good for something uncertain." "And did they think that?" "No. Mostly they seemed relieved. Like they'd been watching me disappear for years and were glad I'd finally woken up. That's because you had been disappearing." I pulled into my parking spot and turned off the engine. We sat there in the quiet car, the evening settling around us. Can I tell you something? Always. Being with you scares me sometimes, because it's so different from anything I've known. With Claire, I always knew where I stood, what was expected, what role I was supposed to play. And with me? With you, I don't know. There's no script, no established pattern, just us, figuring it out as we go. And that's scary, terrifying. But also, I turned to look at her. Also the most alive I've ever felt. She leaned across the console and kissed me, slow and deliberate, the kind of kiss that made everything else fall away. Good, she said against my mouth, because that's what this is supposed to feel like. Alive, not safe. We went upstairs, and I unlocked the door to find my apartment exactly as I'd left it. Lived in now. Books on the shelves, dishes in the sink, evidence of an actual life instead of just existence. Mara kicked off her shoes and went straight to the couch, curling up in the corner like she belonged there. And maybe she did. Maybe that's what this was. Learning that belonging wasn't about performance or accommodation, but about choosing to show up as yourself and being wanted anyway. "What are you thinking?" she asked, watching me. "That this is different. Different how? I'm not trying to be anything right now. I'm not managing your expectations or making sure you're comfortable or anticipating what you need. I'm just here. And how does that feel? Strange, but good." She patted the couch beside her. "Come here." I sat down, and she immediately shifted, resting her head on my shoulder. We fit together easily, not perfectly, but naturally, like two people who'd decided to make space for each other. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," she said. "Like what?" "I don't know. Something true. Something you've been carrying around." I thought about it. About all the things I'd never said because they felt too vulnerable, too revealing. I used to think being good was enough. I thought if I was just good enough, reliable enough, steady enough, present enough, then I'd be loved. And when that didn't work, when I realized Claire didn't want me the way I wanted to be wanted, I thought it meant I wasn't good enough, that I'd failed somehow. And now? Now I think being good was the problem, because I was so focused on being good that I forgot to be real. I forgot that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest. Mara lifted her head to look at me. "You're learning." "Am I?" "Yes, because you're here, telling me something true instead of something safe. That's growth." "It doesn't feel like growth. It feels like I'm constantly on the edge of screwing this up." "That's because you care, because it matters. If you weren't scared of screwing it up, it would mean you didn't value it." "Do you ever feel that way? Scared?" "All the time," she admitted. "I'm scared you'll wake up one day and realize I'm not what you thought, that the fantasy was better than the reality. I'm scared I'll disappoint you, that you'll discover I'm just as flawed and complicated as your ex-wife, just in different ways. You're nothing like Claire." "I'm exactly like Claire. I'm human. I have needs and expectations and moments when I'm difficult. The only difference is you chose me knowing that. You chose complications instead of trying to avoid them." I pulled her closer, feeling the warmth of her body against mine. "I did, didn't I?" "You did. And that's what makes this real. Not that we're perfect together, but that we chose each other knowing we'd have to work at it."
We stayed up late talking, the way we often did, about childhoods and disappointments and the strange paths that had led us both here, about dreams we'd abandoned and ones we were just discovering. Around midnight, she stretched and yawned. I should probably go home. You could stay, I said. The words came out before I'd fully thought them through. If you want. She looked at me, surprised. Are you sure? Yes? No? Maybe. I laughed. I don't know, I just don't want you to leave yet. Ethan, I'm not asking for anything. Just stay. We'll figure out the rest. She studied my face, searching for something. Then she nodded. Okay, but I need to borrow a t-shirt. Deal. That night, lying in bed with Mara beside me, I felt the strangeness of it. Not uncomfortable strangeness, just different. The shape of her body under the covers, the rhythm of her breathing, the weight of her presence. With Claire, I'd always felt like I was maintaining something, making sure she was comfortable, that the temperature was right, that I wasn't taking up too much space. With Mara, I felt like I could just exist. Are you asleep? She whispered. No. What are you thinking about? How different this feels. Good different or bad different? Good. Definitely good. Just new. She rolled over to face me, close enough that I could see her eyes in the darkness. Can I tell you something? Always. I'm glad you're not good at this yet. I'm glad we're both fumbling around, trying to figure out how to be together. It means we're building something instead of following a script. You're glad I'm awkward? I'm glad you're real. That's better than smooth. I kissed her, soft and certain, and felt something settle inside me. This was right. Not perfect, not without risk, but right in a way that mattered more than safety ever had. I'm falling in love with you, I said. The words surprised me as much as they probably surprised her. I hadn't planned to say them, hadn't rehearsed or strategized or waited for the perfect moment. They just came out, true. Mara was quiet for a moment, and I felt a spike of fear that I'd said too much too soon, that I'd ruined something by being honest. Then she smiled. Good, because I'm falling in love with you too. Yeah? Yeah. She touched my face, her hand warm against my cheek. It's terrifying and exhilarating and nothing like I expected. But it's real. And that's what I want. Not a fantasy, not an escape. Just this, whatever we're building together. Even if we screw it up? Especially if we screw it up, because that means we tried. We risked something. I pulled her closer, and we stayed like that, tangled together in the darkness. Two people who'd chosen each other deliberately, knowing it wouldn't be easy, but believing it might be worth it. In the morning, I woke to find Mara already up, standing by the window in my t-shirt, looking out at the city. Hey, I said. She turned, smiling. Hey, sorry, did I wake you? No, come back to bed. In a minute, I'm just thinking. About what? About how strange life is. 6 months ago, I was sitting in that coffee shop trying not to talk to the walls. And now I'm here with you, and it feels like exactly where I'm supposed to be. I got out of bed and went to stand beside her, both of us looking out at the morning light. Is that a good thing? I asked. It's the best thing, because it means we both had to lose ourselves before we could find each other. And that's not a tragedy, that's just life. Messy and complicated and sometimes painful, but also capable of surprising you. I took her hand, lacing our fingers together. I'm glad I surprised you. You didn't surprise me, you showed up.
That's better. We stood there together, watching the city wake up, and I felt it. The certainty that whatever came next, I was finally living my own life. Not the life I thought I should want, not the life that made everyone comfortable, just mine, chosen deliberately, lived honestly, and shared with someone who wanted me exactly as I was.
Epilogue. Never the safe choice. 1 year later, I'm standing in Mara's kitchen, our kitchen now, though we've only lived together for 2 months, watching her dice vegetables for dinner. The afternoon light comes through the window at an angle that makes everything look softer, warmer. "You're staring," she says without looking up. "I'm observing." That's what people who are staring say when they get caught. I smile, moving closer. "Fine, I'm staring." She sets down the knife and turns to face me, wiping her hands on a towel. "Why?" "Because I still can't quite believe this is my life." "Good disbelief or bad disbelief?" "Good. Definitely good." She kisses me, quick and certain the way she does everything, then goes back to the vegetables. "Set the table. Rachel and Jake will be here in 20 minutes. I do as she asks, moving through the space we've created together. It's a small house, nothing fancy. A rental in a neighborhood neither of us had heard of before we started looking, but it's ours, chosen together. A space we're still learning, still filling with the accumulated evidence of our lives. There are her art prints on the walls, alongside my photographs. I'd taken up photography 6 months ago, another small act of reclamation. Books on the shelves from both of our collections, mixed together without system or order. A couch we'd picked out together after arguing good-naturedly about whether gray or blue was more us. We'd chosen gray, then bought blue throw pillows. Compromise, but the kind that felt additive rather than subtractive. The divorce had been finalized over a year ago now. I still thought about Claire sometimes, wondered how she was doing, if she'd found someone who could give her what I hadn't been able to. We'd run into each other once, about 6 months after everything was final. At a coffee shop, ironically, not the one where I'd met Mara, but another one across town. We'd been cordial, asked the right questions. She'd looked good, lighter somehow, like she'd been carrying something heavy and finally set it down. "I heard you're living with someone." "Yeah, Mara. We moved in together last month." She'd nodded, stirring her coffee. "I'm glad that you found what you were looking for." "Have you found what you were looking for?" She'd smiled, a real smile, not the careful ones we'd perfected during our marriage. "I'm figuring it out. I started seeing someone. It's new, but different, in a good way." "Different how?" "He's less careful than you were, more willing to say what he thinks. It's taken some getting used to, but I think maybe that's what I need. Someone who pushes back." I understood what she meant. She'd needed someone who wasn't so accommodating, someone who had edges instead of just surfaces, someone who wasn't me. "I'm happy for you," I'd said, and meant it. "You too, Ethan, really." We'd parted amicably, and I'd walked away feeling something like closure. Not the dramatic kind, with declarations and tears, just the quiet understanding that we'd both moved on to lives that fit us better. The doorbell rings, pulling me from the memory. Jake and Rachel arrive with wine and stories, filling the house with noise and laughter. Their kids are with a babysitter tonight. This is one of the rare adult evenings they get. We eat at the small dining table, the 4 of us crowded together, passing dishes and arguing about movies and politics and whether the couple down the street is actually getting divorced or just going through a phase.
Normal life. But it feels different than the normal life I'd had before. More textured, more present, more mine. "So," Rachel says over dessert, "Jake told me you got another piece published. Congratulations." I feel myself flush, still not used to talking about my writing, even though I'd been doing it consistently for over a year now. "Thanks. It's just a small journal, nothing major." "Don't downplay it," Mara says, squeezing my hand under the table. "You've published 4 pieces this year. That's not nothing." 4? Rachel looks impressed. "What are you writing about?" "Mostly personal essays, about marriage and identity and what it means to become someone new." "Sounds therapeutic," Jake says. "It is, but it's also just what I want to be doing, what I maybe always wanted to be doing before I convinced myself it wasn't practical." "Are you going to write a book?" Rachel asks. "Maybe. I'm working on something. A memoir, sort of, about the year I spent figuring out who I was when I stopped being what everyone needed." "That sounds like it could be really good and really painful to write." "Both," I admit, "but worth it." Mara meets my eyes across the table, and I see the pride there. Not because I'm succeeding or being impressive, but because I'm doing something that matters to me, even when it's hard. That's what this relationship has taught me, that being wanted means being seen, flaws and struggles included. That love isn't about making someone comfortable. It's about witnessing each other's becoming.
After Jake and Rachel leave, Mara and I clean up together. It's domestic and ordinary. Washing dishes, putting away leftovers, wiping down counters. The kind of routine I used to find suffocating. But with Mara, it feels different. We're not performing partnership. We're just partnering. Moving around each other with easy familiarity, occasionally bumping hips or stealing kisses, making the mundane feel intentional. "What are you thinking?" she asks, drawing a plate. "That I'm happy." "Just that?" "No. Also that I'm grateful and surprised and sometimes still a little afraid I'll wake up and realize I dreamed all of this." She sets down the plate and turns to face me. "You didn't dream it. This is real. We're real." "I know. It's just, sometimes I think about the version of me that was still married to Claire, still going through the motions, and I wonder what would have happened if I'd never overheard her that day, if I'd just kept on being quietly miserable without ever naming it." "But you did overhear her, and you did name it, and you made a choice." "The hardest choice I've ever made." "Was it worth it?" she asks, though I can see in her eyes that she already knows the answer. "Every day," I say. "Even the hard days. Even the days when I wonder if I'm doing this right. It's worth it because I'm actually living instead of just managing existence." She kisses me, and I taste wine and dessert and the particular sweetness of being wanted. "Come on," she says, taking my hand. "Let's go to bed." Later, lying in the darkness with Mara beside me, I think about how I got here. Not just the logistics of it, the overheard conversation, the therapy, the divorce, the months of learning to be alone, but the deeper journey, the slow, painful work of unlearning everything I'd been taught about what it meant to be good, about how love was supposed to look, about the difference between being chosen and being wanted. I'd spent 40 years trying to be easy, accommodating, the safe choice, and it had nearly killed me. Not dramatically, not with a bang, but with the quiet erosion of self that comes from living someone else's idea of a good life. Now, lying here with Mara's hand in mine, I understand something I couldn't have understood a year ago. Love isn't about finding someone who needs you. It's about finding someone who wants you,
flaws and complications and inconvenient desires included. It's about choosing to show up as yourself and being chosen in return, not because you're easy, not because you're safe, but because you're you. And that's enough. More than enough. It's everything. The next morning, I wake early and slip out of bed without waking Mara. I make coffee and sit at the small desk we've set up in the corner of the living room, my writing space. The memoir I'd mentioned to Rachel is open on my laptop, the cursor blinking at the end of the last paragraph I'd written. I read it over, then start typing. I wasn't wrong to want safety. I wasn't wrong to value stability. But I was wrong to think those things were the same as being loved. Wrong to believe that being needed was sufficient. Wrong to spend my life being what other people required instead of asking what I required. For 41 years, I was the safe choice, the reliable one, the man you chose when you'd learned your lesson and were ready to be sensible. And I thought that was my identity, my value, my purpose. But it was just a role I'd learned to play because it made other people comfortable, because it allowed me to be loved without ever having to risk being seen. It took losing everything, my marriage, my sense of self, my carefully constructed life, to understand that being safe isn't the same as being chosen, that being needed isn't the same as being wanted, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop being good and start being real. I pause, looking at the words on the screen, that I keep writing. I'm 43 now, living with a woman I met in a coffee shop during the worst period of my life. We've been together for over a year, living together for 2 months, and I'm still learning how to do this, how to be in a relationship where I'm not performing, not managing, not making myself easy. It's harder than I expected, being honest, being complicated, being willing to disappoint someone rather than disappearing into what they need. But it's also better than anything I imagined. Because for the first time in my life, I'm being chosen for the right reasons, not because I'm safe, not because I'm convenient, but because I'm wanted. This time, I wasn't chosen because I fit. I was chosen because I was worth choosing. And that makes all the difference. I save the document and sit back, looking out the window at the morning light. Behind me, I hear Mara moving around, the coffee maker beeping, the sounds of a life being lived. My life. Imperfect and uncertain, and sometimes frightening. But mine. Actually, truly mine. And that's enough.
"Morning," Mara says, appearing with 2 mugs of coffee. She hands me one and peers at my laptop. "Writing?" "Yeah, just adding a little to the memoir." "How's it going?" "Good. I think I might actually finish it." "Of course you will." She sits on the edge of the desk, close enough to touch. "What's this one about?" I think about how to answer. About all the things I've learned this past year. About safety and desire and what it means to be chosen. It's about learning that being wanted is better than being needed, I say finally. That being someone's safe choice isn't the same as being their chosen one. She smiles. "That's good. True. Is that what I am? Your chosen one?" "You're my chosen one because you weren't my safe choice," she says. "Because loving you means choosing complications and uncertainty and the risk of being hurt. And I choose that every day. Not because it's easy, but because you're worth it." I stand up and pull her close, feeling the solid reality of her body against mine. "I choose you too," I say, "every day." "I know," she says. "That's why this works." We stand there for a moment, just holding each other, and I feel it, the certainty that this is right. Not perfect, not without challenges, but right in a way that matters more than safe ever did. Outside, the city is waking up. People moving through their lives, making choices, building futures. And I'm one of them now. Not watching from the sidelines, not managing someone else's happiness, but actually living. Chosen deliberately. Wanted completely. Alive.